The idea of the probable, almost certain future is that, we have this idea in our heads of what's going to happen. So we move a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff in the future that, at least in our minds, that are in the future. And that as we go through our day, we're living as if those things are certain to happen, And those could be short-term things or they could be long-term things. The short-term thing could be like, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to, take a shower, get dressed, go to work. I'm going to do a meeting. I'm going to eat my lunch. I'm going to, write the report. I'm going to go home. I'm going to pick up my wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, whatever, go see the movie, go have a bite to eat, and then go home and go to sleep, right? That's my idea of like, I look forward and go, that's the probable, almost certain future for the day for me. Or it's long-term, like I'm going to go to college. I'm going to, go to Wall Street. I'm going to get married. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to retire. I'm going to move and live on the beach or whatever, right? Those are things that somebody might have in their head. And then something comes along and I'll be damned, that's not happening at all. Like all those things that were in my mind as the landscape of the future are just suddenly invalidated. And boy, have we all learned that.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP, Mary Lou Kaiser here. And it is game day at the Play Your Position podcast, which means I have today's starting quarterback suited up, ready to take the field. His name is Jim McCarthy, and he is talking to us today from the beautiful city of Pasadena, California, where one of my favorite sporting events of all time, the Rose Bowl, takes place. And we'll see if that happens in 2021. In the meantime, today's show is all about Jim. Jim, are you ready for kickoff?
Let's go.
Yes.
I'm ready.
I'm ready too. So here's some things I know about Jim, guys. First of all, he started his career in the e-commerce business way back in 1997. He has almost 20 years experience in live events. He has sold tens of millions of tickets to millions of people. He co-founded TEDx Broadway. He advises entrepreneurs. He's the CEO of Gold Star Events and Stellar Tickets. And his current mission is to enable artists and organizations to create high-quality online content, helping them find success in this new era where online events are transforming the entertainment landscape. And Jim, you definitely have a bird's eye view to what is happening in the entertainment landscape. So right out of the gate, my first question is, tell us about when you got the call to leadership and do the work you're doing now.
Gradually, I think, is the answer to that. Leadership is a funny thing because you find out if you're a leader when you look around and see people following you. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're not really a leader, it turns out. And I think that through my life, I think all the way back to when I was probably 8 or 10 or 12. And, back in the day when kids just played in the street together in large groups, like, growing up, when I grew up, you'd just go outside in the afternoon and kids would gather, to do stuff. But, in those situations, it always seemed like I was organizing whatever it was that we were doing, like I would turn our spontaneous fights into like wrestling tournaments, or I would turn, there were always things where it's like, well, what are we going to do? And I'd say, okay, let's do this, and so I think it's just something about that where I was more comfortable sort of bringing a kind of like providing people with an idea of what they could do. And for whatever reason, generally speaking, people have been interested in doing the things that I said, hey, we could do that, So,
I love that. So you were a little kid and you already had the spark in you to be an event manager, producer. Were you selling tickets to
No,
they're the kids in your name? Hey, come see the fight.
You know what? It's funny because I despite the fact that I've been, in entrepreneurship and high growth businesses, I wasn't the kid that like sold lemonade or did any of that stuff. All my leadership was non-commercial. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, which I don't think is that uncommon, really. There's this idea that like, the kids who are out there like collecting the cans and making the money or whatever and selling it and turning 2 hamsters into $1 million or whatever, those are the kids that go on to found, companies. But that's not been my experience. I mean, there certainly are those people, but there are a lot of people that like just later in life realized how they could apply, the tools of entrepreneurship and business to their lives. And that's me for sure.
Okay. And so the entertainment business bit you got that bug, and you now have companies, Gold Star Events and Stellar Tickets. What is happening right now with the fact that so much of what we, entertainment, like all other industries, kind of came to a halt about 6 months ago? And, how are you helping people navigate through this very different time that we're living in?
Yeah, so our business is really live entertainment. Gold Star, which I think probably a lot of people, we actually have an office in your town, Mary Lou. One of our offices is in Portland, Oregon. So
yay, that's cool.
Yeah, we have a lot of employees and team members there. But so our business is in live entertainment, selling tickets to things like comedy and sports and theater and music and, all that great stuff that makes, living in a place like Portland or LA or New York or Chicago or Dallas or wherever, really exciting and fun.
Yes.
And boy, that came to a screeching halt.
It sure did.
Much, just like now you see it, now you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so that, for us, the Gold Star business essentially dropped off the face of the earth over about a 36-hour period.
Oh, man.
Amazing. Just truly something you don't expect or get. We were tracking it. I gotta say, like, it was like a very slow moving freight train headed our way, and there was no way to get off the track.
Right.
We started tracking it, the issue of coronavirus, in late January because it's just started to get obvious that it wasn't going to stay within the boundaries of China by then. And what I did was I had our customer service team just record the number of cases that people would write in and say, hey, I'm worried about, my event. Will I, what happens if I want to cancel because I'm afraid of going to the event? And so it started off very slow. We didn't even it wasn't more than, one every couple of days or whatever. And then it just started to go 1 a day, 2 a day, 4 a day, 8 a day, 20 a day. And I said to my partners and the management team, I said, I know the shape of this curve. It's exponential.
Mm.
And so, of course, we started thinking about what might that mean. And even still, I don't know. The human mind refuses to come to grips with something that's so discontinuous with anything that's ever experienced, So even with that information coming in, and even despite the fact that we were preparing, it still was a shock to just go like right to zero.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? Like one of the things that when I was, reading about you and learning more about what you do is, there's now this duality of virtual events versus physical events, right? And you've been a live physical event, the concerts, the sporting events, the Broadway shows, that kind of thing. So what's happening now?
Well, so the first month we absorbed the shock and, did all the canceling and did what we could to keep team's morale as high as we could. And after that, we started to notice that these online shows were getting better. They started off pretty cheap and cheerful. You probably watched a few of them,
Like what? Give us for example.
Oh, a musician sitting on his or her sofa playing a few songs in the guitar.
Yes, got it.
Maybe it's free. Maybe it's $5 donation to a cause of some kind. And so the initial wave of and I'm doing air quotes that you can't see, but online events was not great, right? It just wasn't great. But then we started to see people doing good shows, good high quality camera setups, audio, video put together to be viewed and enjoyed in an online event type setting, And when people started to do that, when artists and other producers started to do that, people responded. So whether you're talking about somebody like Hershey Felder, who's a piano player who did, a show where $50 ticket, beautifully shot performance of him playing a whole bunch of music on the piano, or just others, where we would see these creative things. The Geffen Playhouse in Los Angeles is doing a thing called The Present, where you sign up for it and you get a box in the mail of all these little things that go along with the show. You're sort of doing magic tricks along with the performer in the show. And
that's cool.
It was very cool. And Hershey was charging $50 and the Geffen was charging, I think, $90 or $100, and people were buying them in big numbers. And so we started thinking something's happening here. There's something real here. And we realized that people were going to, that there's a lot of reasons for people in the live entertainment business to want to do online shows, and they were going to need tools to do that. So over the course of, so from May till really the end of July, we built a platform that we call a total show management system for online events, and it's called Stellar. And it's now available, and people are using it, and shows are happening on it, and it's a real thing. And I think it's by far the most complete system for people who want to produce professional online shows to do that now. So that was something we did because we saw what was happening in the market. We saw that people who take the online event world seriously were getting results.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is such an exciting story because it does show, first of all, creative thinking and reading the signs, looking out and saying, what are people doing? And then putting together something. I mean, you had no idea. Nobody does, right? And here you are with a platform now that could become the gold standard for online production. And I'm curious, do you foresee, because you're boots on the ground, Jim, I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse of what's happening. I mean, do you have any sense of when we might be able to return as consumers of live entertainment to stadiums, to theaters? I mean, has there been any date put on the calendar, or is it still way up in the air and people are like, we just don't know?
I think it's up in the air to some degree, but I actually think, when we started this, and I'll tell you, this is maybe a useful exercise for entrepreneurs. When we started thinking about Stellar, we put things into two categories that we had to deal with. One were scenarios about the pandemic, and one were choices that we could make. And the difference between the scenarios and the choices is we can't control which scenario plays out with a pandemic, right?
Right.
But we can control the choices that we make. And so the scenarios that we laid out for the pandemic were optimistic, pessimistic, and somewhere in the middle. And the optimistic case was that maybe about now, September, October sort of time frame, there'd be a little bit of a return. The pessimistic case was like, way into next year, deep into next year. And the middle case was maybe you're starting to see some business flow back in, the beginning of 21, let's say. And, what we realized was that whatever choices we made, we're going to have to basically work almost regardless of which of those scenarios played out, because we had no control over those scenarios, right? So that's how we looked at it, and where it is right now, the optimistic scenario did not play out, as you know. I mean, otherwise,
yes, it did not.
Did not. I didn't think that it would, because I couldn't see how it would. That to me it would have taken some kind of, I don't know, really unexpected turn of events to change the situation. What I think is very likely to happen is about this time or so next year, this time being early fall, it will start to feel about normal. Whatever the new version of normal is, it will feel about normal. And that will mean about this time next year-ish, you'll go into a theater or a stadium without a mask, without distance, and feel okay about it. That's what I believe. Now, I believe in advance of that, there's going to be other stuff that can be done indefinitely from region to region. I think it's going to vary. But so I would expect that some semblance of going back to the venue starts happening in February or March. And then it's not going to be like an all clear siren where you go from 0 to 100. It's not going to happen that way, I don't think. It'll be more gradual.
Yeah.
That's that's how it looks to me right now.
Okay. Well, again, none of us can predict the future, but We can also, I like that framing of optimistic, pessimistic, and somewhere in between. And, things are going to go as things are going to go. In the meantime, could you tell us a story, Jim, about a time when outside of the pandemic or even within, things, for so many of us, things have not gone according to plan over the last 6 months. And we've all been finding ourselves fumbling around, literally fumbling the ball, our metaphorical ball, getting sacked, getting intercepted. What are some ways that people who either maybe in the entertainment business or you're also an entrepreneur, so business-minded folks who are listening, tell us a story about how you have recovered to some degree. I mean, you built Stellar Platform. That's one way. But what are some other things that people can be thinking about to just keep moving forward, right? And not be lying on the field going, forget it, I'm done.
Yeah. Are you thinking specifically about the pandemic or just in general responding?
In general, I think. Yeah. I mean, the pandemic is the pandemic. And
I think that the way I think about this, and I'll tell you, it took me a long time to really learn this. I wish I'd known it when I was even younger than I was when I did. But a lot of the time we have this idea, and this is not a term I made up, but it's a good one, the probable, almost certain future. Have you heard this term?
No. So please share.
It's a term. I'm not exactly, I think it could, I don't know where it came from, but the idea of the probable, almost certain future is that we have this idea in our heads of what's going to happen, and so we move a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff in the future that, at least in our minds, that are in the future, and that as we go through our day, we're living as if those things are certain to happen, and those could be short-term things or they could be long-term things. The short-term thing could be like, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to, take a shower, get dressed, go to work. I'm going to do a meeting. I'm going to eat my lunch. I'm going to, write the report. I'm going to go home. I'm going to pick up my wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, whatever, go see the movie, go have a bite to eat, and then go home and go to sleep. Right. That's my idea of, like, I look forward and go, that's the probable, almost certain future for the day for me. Or it's long-term, like I'm going to go to college. I'm going to, go to Wall Street. I'm going to get married. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to retire. I'm going to move and live on the beach or whatever. Right? Those are things that somebody might have in their head. And then something comes along and I'll be damned, that's not happening at all. Like all those things that were in my mind as the landscape of the future are just suddenly invalidated. And boy, have we all learned that today.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like, nope, turns out you won't be doing that. Last year, this is actually, it's an interesting story. I don't think I've ever talked about this story on a podcast. Last year, on December 3rd, I was racing around through my workday because it was the last day I was going to be in the office for about 3 weeks in the midst of a very busy travel December. I had 3 major business trips planned, and the first one was starting the next day. And so I had a long list of to-dos and cleanups and that kind of thing. And I was just, on top of the world. You know what I mean? How when you're just like in the zone, you're just knocking things out. And I had these 3 very sort of exciting, glamorous sort of business trips in front of me, big time. You know what I mean? I was big time. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And then I was like, okay, I got to grab something to eat really quick. So from the desk that I'm sitting at right now, I walked down a flight of stairs, walked half a block toward the restaurant where my food was, turned a corner, walked into the restaurant, hit a puddle of water on a stone floor, and demolished my right arm.
Oof.
Ligament.
Yikes.
All, as it turned out, dislocated the elbow, fractured the elbow, and tore all the ligaments in my arm.
Oh, man.
And over the course of the next sort of 30 minutes, I realized like all that stuff that was in my mind just wasn't going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just wasn't. It seemed very real, but it turns out it wasn't real at all. Because instead, what was going to happen was, surgery and all kinds of stuff, right? Like,
sure, right.
And I think that idea of the probable, almost certain future. Now, obviously, nobody wants to smash their arm and have surgery and spend a month, recuperating and stuff like that. But when it comes to that idea about what is almost the probable, almost certain future, the thing that you think you're destined to do, well, that's just an idea. And a lot of times when something changes, we get upset just because it's different from what we thought. When in fact, it really might not be any worse, right? I mean, it's just different. And the distress of that difference can be enough to throw us. So I guess what I would say as a piece of advice is, just because the future doesn't pan out exactly the way you thought doesn't necessarily mean it's worse. You might just be reacting to the distress of your probable, almost certain future being destroyed.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. And the word distress captures my attention because that's exactly what people are feeling. And when you can name the emotion and then begin to unravel, well, wait a minute, maybe this isn't as bad, instead of immediately thinking it's bad because it's different.
Yeah.
Look at it as, okay, it's just different. And then build from there. I mean, it's those kinds of events that there's just no way that, right. Because if you could predict it, you wouldn't do it. Like you wouldn't have stepped on that puddle or you wouldn't have gone to that restaurant, right? I mean, that's the thing.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
So one of the things that I learned about you, Jim, is that you run mastermind groups, and there's a huge waiting list apparently because you just are a popular mastermind facilitator and obviously have great insights that you share. Could you talk about, for a minute or so, the coaching and teaching relationship that you perhaps set up for the people that join you in your masterminds? And also, how do you feed your head with who coaches you? How do you continue to become a better Jim?
Yeah. So the mastermind that we do is an entrepreneurship mastermind that we do once a month. It's been online lately, of course.
Right.
Normally it's here in Pasadena. And the wait list only exists because we had physical limits on the number of people who can in it. And that, but it always fills up, and I'm always like, please, if you're not going to come, please don't say you're going to come because you're leaving people at home. And even still, unfortunately, there's always people that can't come. Less true with online events, obviously, which is an interesting part of the discussion I'm sure we'll get to. But, the idea of this, to put a group of people to work deep listening to an entrepreneur's situation, and listening is something that people think they do more than they actually do it. Because a good, I guess, what's the right way to say this? Good listening involves kind of putting your ego on pause. Good listening involves putting your ego on pause, putting your interests on pause, and trying to take in all the information that's provided by what the person is saying. And if you can get a whole group of people to do that, which I think we sometimes succeed in doing because of the structure of the discussion that we have, then, the amount of information that starts to come out of people or the amount of insight that they have is extraordinary,
Yes.
When you get people to, stop thinking about, oh, I agree, I disagree, that guy's right, that guy's wrong, I know something he doesn't, or he knows something just pause all those thoughts and just go like, okay, what information is being presented? Not just the words that they're saying, but everything they're bringing to it, right? Then you start to go, yeah, that's interesting. And that reminds me of this. And that thing that it might remind you of could be very valuable to the entrepreneur who's the centerpiece of the mastermind, right? Because typically what happens is they brief us on their situation and then ask a question that they need help with or insight on. And then typically for about 45 minutes after that, we just ask them questions. And they're not questions meant to challenge or, I always tell people, This isn't freaking Shark Tank. You know what I mean? This isn't
bombarding them with.
What makes you think this? It's not like that, right? It's not a pitch competition. It's an attempt to help the entrepreneur. And so the questions are designed to learn more about the situation and get deeper in the situation. And ultimately, and by the way, that experience of people asking questions and listening to the answers is one of the reasons that it's popular, is because people almost never experience that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a factor of modern life or if it's always been this way, but what the buzz that people get from being in a room where 40 people are genuinely asking questions to understand rather than to posture or pose or, get information to their benefit, it just has a feeling that you don't encounter that often.
Mm-hmm. How do you create, you brought this up, how do you create that sense of safety and the ability for people to relax and put their ego aside in the online space? Because I have experienced many, many times in my life, like many listeners as well, the absolute, just the gloriousness of being in a live event where that magic is at play and you feel that energy moving and that there really is this sense of community. How are you facilitating community in the online world?
We do, under normal circumstances, we do this live, but we've been doing it online lately. In the live world, it's really a matter of me reminding people what the standards are for the discussion at the beginning. And it always feels a little pedantic because I spend 5 minutes, at the beginning of the thing going, we have to do this, and making the point about what listening really is and all this stuff. And then as a moderator stepping in and saying, wait a second, that sounds like a comment. We're asking questions right now. You know what I mean? It's like, please think about it as a question and ask it that way, or just hold on to your thoughts. And doing that without being a jerk is a balance, I think. You got to,
sure.
But at the same time, there have been moments where I'm just going to ask you to stop. I think that's totally off base for what we're trying to achieve. Hold that thought. It might become useful later. But I've just, on a few occasions, interrupted people and said, that's not moving in the direction. And so people kind of, I guess probably some people just don't like it. And so they don't participate after that. But the people that come are ones that generally do, so you got to, I think, structure and just standing up for that structure,
And so are you mirroring that same approach only over Zoom or whatever platform that you continue to? Yeah. So you've just brought that. And is it when you compare and contrast, I mean, obviously nothing can replace a live event.
Yeah.
But given our circumstances, do you see progress in terms of people engaging and being vulnerable and not, clicking over to things like, I'm just curious because you have that front row seat to, here's the live events I once was running and now I'm running these.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I learned was you have to be more present as the moderator in the online setting.
Yes.
Because in a live setting, you can sort of look around, you sort of glance over at somebody and choose the trajectory of their thinking. But you can't really do that in the online setting. So you have to be even more present in that setting.
Do you find that's affected your energy levels? Do you feel more drained just because you've had to put more energy towards that focus and being present?
Yes. And I think that it simultaneously demands more energy, and it doesn't have, in this context, and I want to talk about shows later, but in the context of a business discussion like this, you also don't get the sort of reward of the interpersonal connections that you get in person.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, you gotta come into it, more psyched up and I'd say oriented toward the goal or the service of the thing that you're doing.
Yeah. We'll talk about the shows. Just keep going on that.
Okay. So shows, the idea here is that there is a place for online events. And by online events now, I'm not talking about webinars and things like that. I'm talking about, the kinds of shows that Gold Star normally sells, which are entertainment, right? So music, theater, comedy, whatever you can think of. And we've seen examples. I don't know if you're a big K-pop fan. Are you a big K-pop fan?
I would not classify myself as a big K-pop fan, but I know what I do like. What's that one group? BTS.
Yes, they're the ones. They're the ones. The world's biggest band. So did you know that in June they did an online concert for 750,000 people?
No, I did not.
750,000 people paid to see a BTS concert online back in June.
Wow.
And it was like something like a $20 million gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's scale. That's
right. And so let's talk about live events, which are great. But they have this funny business model, which is usually up to about 65% sold capacity. They don't make money. That's typical. Typical is 65% is the break-even point. And that's because, like an airline or whatever, the costs are mostly fixed, right? After that, then you're in a profitable position with a show. And of course, it varies from show to show. But so good. So now you're in the good part of in the good zone. And then what happens? You keep going along in the good zone, and then you crash right into a wall known as capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But just when it's getting good in terms of profitability, in terms of cash flow to the organizer or the venue or whatever, the artist, slam, the wall comes crashing down on you. That is the nature of the live entertainment industry. It's why, as a business model, it can be a little iffy, right?
Sure, makes sense.
Yeah, works if you do it well, but also it carries a lot of risk. Now, the thing about online events, and the reason that they're so important even beyond COVID for the live entertainment business, is that they represent an unlimited reach tool, right? There's no reason why, if you have the right platform, if you can serve 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people with an online event, you can't serve 10,000, 100,000, or 1 million.
Right.
There's no theoretical limit to the capacity. And so when you consider that, if you're doing a show for an in-person crowd, and then you add what it takes to make that a compelling online show as well, all of a sudden you have this entirely new supercharger for your business model.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so what I'm talking about to the live entertainment, anybody who's producing shows today, anybody who produces live events of any kind, is, yes, online events done well and ticketed and paid for are a really important way to get through the COVID crisis. But beyond that, right, they're not just a stopgap, they're a supercharger for when the in-person events come back. Because on top of that, you suddenly have a very high margin, very profitable, unlimited, as you said, scalable tool that you can use that goes on top of the normal business model. So it's a big opportunity. I mean, it's one that, in a way, as an industry, live entertainment and events in general have been looking for forever.
Yes. And so out of something that has been, for a lot of people, just so horrendous, could be this incredible opportunity for more profitability, because you can only pack so many people into. I think back to, the days of stadium concerts like GNR days and Van Halen and The Who, and what we just don't see stadium rock anymore. That model just went by the wayside. And yes, you have concerts, but I mean, I don't even know if anybody under the age of 25 knows what that's like, to be in a stadium but from a business model standpoint, to your point, you can only fit so many people in, standing room only, right? And as a football fan, I know the power of being in a sold out stadium when you are cheering for your team. It is electrifying. It is energizing. Right. However, you can't make any more money beyond the physical people there.
That's
because that's just how it is. And so how interesting.
That's why Pro Sports has television, right?
That is correct.
That is correct. And streaming too. They have their own version of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I say to people in the other parts of the live entertainment business when they say, if we do that, it's going to stop us from being able to sell the in-person tickets. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. And I give them the thought exercise of, okay, imagine the NFL Okay. Imagine that which they regard as being like eminently popular and wealthy and whatever compared to theater and music and so forth and so on. They see them as just, in a different stratosphere, which is probably true from a revenue point of view. But I say, okay, imagine the NFL. Imagine if the only way you could see an NFL game was in the stadium. Like literally that was the only way you could see it. Would it make football more popular or less popular?
Less.
Would it make the tickets more desirable or less desirable? Would it make the NFL a more stable and secure organization or a less stable? And it's obvious, as what you just said, it's obvious when you think of it that way that it would be a big step in the wrong direction for them. And yet the rest of the industry hasn't realized that the same logic applies.
It does.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I've been watching a little bit of football just to see what it was like, how are they going to do it? And I find it so fascinating how they're using, pumped in cheering and how it's so orchestrated to the exact play. It sounds like, it's just been a fascinating experience.
Pretty good illusion that they're.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And, I'm a futurist. And so I love thinking about, what is going to happen based on what is happening now. And I'm also an optimist. And I just believe that, yes, certain models will come to an end, but we don't ride around in horse and buggy anymore, right? And gasoline cars are going to go by the wayside at some point. It's just evolution, it's progress, it's the more life principle and all that kind of stuff. But one thing, Jim, that we can count on as football fans is one team or both is going to score a touchdown. So we are at the part of the show that I call touchdown, which means I'm putting you in the red zone with less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You are down by 4 points, which means it's now or never. Tell us a story about a time when you ran the metaphorical ball into the end zone for that game-winning touchdown.
Do you want to hear an actual sports-based story of me actually doing that?
Why not?
This is a great story. You got me to. You're getting me to tell personal stories. Okay, so this is true. This is a true story. So I was 13, and I was playing on a basketball team. You would not look at me and think I'm a basketball guy, but as a kid, I played a lot of basketball. And it was about, I think there were like 5 seconds left. It was the championship game. I'm not kidding you. It was the championship game of our little youth league. So all season long, it come down to this. And the other team had a free throw. And I was standing in the lane, waiting for this free throw. And we were down by 1 with 5 seconds left. And I thought to myself, I am going to get this rebound and I'm going to run down court and score.
Wow.
This thought occurred to me because it wasn't like, I was pretty good, but I wasn't, like some kind of superstar. And so the kid missed the shot. I just muscled into the lane, grabbed the ball, and I go trucking down the length of the floor to score. And I go up for my layup and I just get clobbered, right? So I get fouled. I go to the free throw line and, I sink both shots and the clock expires and we won the championship on that play. So that literally happened. That's my literal story of doing that, which I always thought, that was fun.
That is so fun. That's like one of those movie moments.
Yeah.
Truly. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely nothing was at stake, but still it was good. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Who knows if it had gone the other way? If your life would be what it is today. I mean, that could have been one of those pivotal moments. We just don't know.
I hope I would have gotten something out of the experience the other way.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap things up today, Jim, one of my final questions is asking you to share with us 1 to 3 key offensive strategies straight out of your leadership playbook that listeners could implement right away to make some forward progress in their lives, their businesses, or careers. What could you share with us?
I mentioned it before, but I think it's a really good way to look at it, which is when you think about scenario planning for your business, don't think of scenarios as your choices. Think of scenarios as ways that the world could play out, right? Because those are the things you don't have control of. a lot of people, when they sit down to plan their business, they say, well, I could do this, or I could do this. Which one's better? Well, I think maybe a more useful way to think of it is, what are the major issues that could happen, right? And right now it's obvious the pandemic is very important in our business, but there's always major things that could happen, right? That you don't have control of, and that really determine the nature of the world that you're going to be part of. So if you think about what scenarios are possible and you invent ones both that you believe could happen or that you believe will happen, and ones that you think probably won't happen but could, and then you design your strategy to be suited to either all of those, or to be able to survive any of the potential outcomes that come along. That's a thing that I don't think enough people do, especially small business people.
No, I think you're right. Certainly, I certainly haven't done that, and I'm making mental notes here. I'm excited that I will, be able to listen back to this episode, because I think that's a great tip. I really, really do. Well, and it's opposite.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's contrarian thinking. Most people approach it the other way, and you're saying, no, don't do that. Look at the way scenarios play out. Yeah.
Yeah. With a podcast, let's say you were a podcaster. I know you are a podcaster. So
yes, I am.
Suppose that we were in more normal times, right? And you were just thinking about, gee, what kinds of things could change let's say you were a podcaster that was reliant on the business model being the way it is. And you were thinking, like, what could happen? How could this change? Well, might Apple start charging podcasters to make podcasts available, right? Like, well, if you had reason to think like that kind of scenario could play out, and this has happened where people are so committed into a platform online of some
Facebook.
kind. Yeah, right. That's a great example where they suddenly said, like, you remember all those people you had reached to? You don't have that anymore. And a lot of people were completely flat-footed by that and highly dependent.
Yep. So what is your overarching advice? Is to, we have all these platforms, and what should we keep in mind? That, I hear what you're saying is, don't count on those to always be around. Yeah, they may not. Right.
Yeah. The big things, the big pieces that can move in your environment without your consent or any control on your part are ones that you have to take account of. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the main thing. Like you don't know. It's like, when the elephant starts running, you better know where he is.
Yeah, you better.
Yeah.
Especially if he's mad.
Yeah. He doesn't even have to be mad. All he has to do is trot. And
yeah,
think about
true.
It. Yeah. If you've got
I love it.
Yeah. So, and I think we're all learning that to some degree right now, because we're obviously in the teeth of something that nobody can control. Yeah. But it's true regardless, right? I've been and so have you, I think, but I've been in the online business long enough to see platforms come and go.
Oh, yes.
To see platforms, and this is just one local kind of issue when it comes to scenario planning, but or to see platforms go like, well, it used to work like that, now it works like this, and put entire cottage industries out of business in so doing.
Yeah. Yep.
So could happen, has happened, will almost certainly happen again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the advice there is own your permission assets, right? Own the ability to reach people somehow, right? If you're totally dependent on a platform or platforms, then you're vulnerable, which is why websites are great and mailing lists are great and other things where you can't be denied.
Yes.
Those are helpful.
Oh, absolutely. I think about, these social media influencers who are dependent upon the platform on which they're influencing, and that could go away, and we just don't know. So great advice. Thank you for reminding us that when you control your own assets, and that is possible, least it's an insurance policy. It's an insurance policy. So that's great. And for people who'd like to learn more about you, Jim, where do you hang out online?
I'm on Twitter, Gold Star Jim, and of course, stellartickets.com if you want to get some help in creating an online event and selling it and making money from it.
Nice.
And I actually created a series. I'll share the link with you for your show notes. I created a series of bite-sized videos about how to succeed with online events that people might enjoy too. And
where would that be? On your website?
It's on YouTube. It's also on what we call Stellar Academy, which is academy.stellartickets.com.
Okay.
And like I said, I can also give you the link in case people want to see it.
Yeah, go for it. Just say it out loud, and I'll make sure I put it on the show notes page.
The YouTube link is too long to say out loud, but
right, of course,
yeah,
of course, yeah. Just send it to me, and team, you know that to connect with Jim, to learn more about him, on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. It'll be just so simple. You can just click links and check out what he's up to. He's definitely onto something, and this was a really interesting conversation today, Jim, because you enlightened me about possibilities in the online entertainment space, as well as, really providing an optimistic picture that we will be able to return one day to see our favorite actors, our favorite performers in a theater, in a stadium, where we can, and also mastermind groups, just entrepreneurs gathering to rub elbows and help each other. It's great. So I really appreciate your time today and your willingness to open up your playbook and let us inside. It's been great.
It's been my pleasure.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Got a great key offensive strategy you like to share? Write to us at coach@pyppodcast.com or on Twitter, use #PYP and let us know how you're running your ball into the end zone for those game-winning touchdowns.